welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, the radio chick, Annie Ubelis. Join Annie on Tuesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with an open chat room full of her regulars. And yes, you can even call in. Call 917-889-3675. That's 917-889-3675 to be a part of the action on the phone line. Not able to listen live? Not a problem. You can always catch Annie, the radio chick, and Southern Sense Talk Radio podcasts in archives at southern-sense.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Southern Sense the right way.
Ooh, thank God it's Friday. Good afternoon. You're here listening to Southern Sense here live on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, the Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina, up on iTunes, YouTube, and oh God, forget about it. Just go to our website, which is the name of the show, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick, Annie, along with my debonair and intellectual co-host, Curtis C.S. Bennett. Good afternoon, Curtis. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine. I'm enjoying all the things that are going on in Washington under our new president, and I'm looking forward to the weeks to come.
So am I. I don't know for sure, but Doc Miola is in the chat room, so I'm I believe, possibly today, if not very soon, we're going to be up on APR radio. So, Doc, let me know if we are definitely, and please put a link in the chat room for people to see and listen in on. We've got two great guests joining us. My dearest friend, and once I get talking with her, we sit on the phone for at least an hour. Fritzi of Red Fox Radio. She'll be joining us shortly after the dedication, along with her co-host, Tim Burton. We're going to be having the two of them from Global Patriot Radio joining us. Exciting stuff that's going on in the news, a lot of talk about. And I was sitting furiously writing notes about Tim's court case and everything else that's going on with Brexit and so forth. So it'll be a lot of fun getting into all those subjects today. So I want to welcome everyone that's up in the chat room and that is listening in the studio. If you did call into the studio and after the dedication you want to join the conversation, we'll be happy to have you. Just remember to press 1 when you do, and we'll be happy to bring you in. So, as I said, we do a dedication at the start of each and every show, and today is no different. Today's dedication is going to go out to Deputy Sheriff Dennis Wallace out of Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department in California. His end of watch was November 13th of 2016. And unfortunately, Blog Talk Radio is messing me up again. I'm looking for my dedication music. And, of course, everything's moved around where it's not supposed to be. And here we go. Got it. This is from Ruben Vives and Jack Leonard of the L.A. Times. A Stanislaus County Sheriff's deputy was shot and killed in an execution carried out by a wanted man who was caught hours later after he carjacked one motorist, robbed a liquor store, and tried to snatch a purse from a woman in Tulare County, authorities said. Deputy Dennis Wallace, a 20-year department veteran, was shot twice in the head shortly after coming across a stolen van in Fox Grove Park, just outside the city of Houston, Stanislaus County, said Adam Christensen, County Sheriff. We know for a fact that the gun was used in this crime was in direct contact with his head when the trigger was pulled twice, Christensen said. According to a video posted by news station KCR3, this was an execution. The suspect, identified as David Machado Jr., 36, fled before carjacking a 2009 white Kia Rio in the nearby community of Keys, Christensen said. The van was abandoned nearby. While on the run, Machado traveled at least 150 miles before committing an armed robbery at a convenience store in Lindsay, about 15 miles east of the city of Tulare in the Central Valley. During another news conference, Christensen said the suspect was arrested, which was shortly after noon. Machado tried to steal a purse from a woman who fought back and called police. Police officers who responded to her report chased Machado on foot and took him into custody. He surrendered to those peace officers who were chasing him, Christensen said. He said Machado was identified through his tattoos and a photograph that had been released to other law enforcement agencies. Christensen said authorities had recovered a van Machado used to flee from Fox Grove Park, as well as the Kia Rio he carjacked later. There's still much work to be done, Christensen said. We will bring Machado back here to Stanislaus County to stand trial. We will seek justice, and justice will be done in this case. The events that led to the shooting began at 8:24 a.m., when Wallace was called in and was told by dispatch that a car he saw in the Fox Grove fishing area access was stolen. Wallace asked for another unit, but never responded to additional messages from dispatchers. A second deputy discovered Wallace when he arrived. The gunman had fled. The carjacking keys occurred about 8:40 a.m., the sheriff said. Machado, he said, had an outstanding warrant in connection with another felony, but the sheriff did not elaborate. He is a known criminal, Christensen said. Wallace, he said, was well known for working on anti-drug and early intervention programs. He was married with a family. And this is from Sarah Heese of KCRA. About 3,000 people attended a memorial service for fallen Stanislaus County Deputy Dennis Wallace, who was remembered as an officer who always cared and had a smile on his face. The service at Cross Point Community Church in Modesto, with bagpipes, drums, and a prayer, Stanislaus County Sheriff Adam Christensen led off the speakers at Wallace's funeral. Dennis was a hero to many, compassionate in his service, and dedicated to his professionalism. Dennis wore his badge with pride, loved his job, and loved serving the community. Christensen then called up Wallace's brother, Modesto Police Detective Dave Wallace, and handed over his fallen brother's badge, which Wallace was wearing when he was killed. Representative Jeff Dunham spoke out about Wallace's service to the community and the sacrifice all law enforcement make. The thin blue line is the noblest of professions, Dunham said. They take an oath to defend us in good times and in bad. Dennis was a role model to all. He dedicated his career and life to the next generation. Law enforcement officers from more than 175 agencies across the country were in attendance, including as far away as Texas, Boston, Chicago, and New York. Elementary school teacher Marika Morrison talked of Wallace's impact on not just the students, but also the teachers at her school. Deputy Wallace didn't just inspire the students, but inspired me as well to listen to the students, Morrison said. Dennis, I will never forget your positive message, and I hope each and every day I make you proud. Wallace's family friend, George Carr, spoke of how Wallace used his position in law enforcement to better the community, how he had a special way of helping children who were feeling down or scared. Dennis lived for being in law enforcement and wore the uniform and badge proudly, Carr said. He used the uniform for building partnerships and trust between law enforcement and youth. He had a gift for working with young people. Wallace's nephew, Jacob Wallace, took the stage with more than 30 of Wallace's nieces and nephews saying, "We represent Dennis's kids. He was our biggest fan, always a humble man, except when talking about his kids," Jacob said, in which case he would talk as long as he can about every single one of our accomplishments and plans for the future. Holding back tears, Jacob told of how he and his cousins will carry on Wallace's legacy. Today's show is dedicated not only to Deputy Sheriff Dennis Wallace, but also to all the first responders out there who every day don their uniform, never knowing whether or not they will go home in one piece, much less alive. We also dedicate it to all the brave men and women out there who serve in our military from the birth of our nation to today, and those who will serve in the future. And we dedicate this song, Last Call, by Dave Bray. God bless each and every one of them. Is this Tim? Hello, Skype caller? Hello, Skype caller? You raised your hand? Is this Tim? Skype caller? Hello, Skype caller? Hey, Cal, do you have eyes on the studio? Cal? Curtis, can you hear me? Curtis?
Tell my children that I love them. Oh, yeah, the daddy always loved them so. Tell them to hold the mother tight and to never let her go.
Since it appears you're calling back into a live show, we are reconnecting you now.
Fight for me.
Cal, can you hear me? Cal?
I can hear you.
All right.
Yeah?
Do you have eyes on the studio?
No, you and Curtis are logged in, so I can't get in there.
Oh, okay. All right, because I see a Skype caller. I don't know if that is Tim or not, and I'm having problems with my Skype caller.
Oh, is his hand raised?
There was a Skype caller raised, and they disappeared.
Okay, that will be Tim.
Okay.
And he'll be, 1111, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks, babe. We'll see you in a bit.
Okay, sweetie.
Bye.
Talk to you in a sec.
Tim? Tim? Can you hear me, Tim?
Hello, Annie. It's Tim here. How are you doing?
Oh, finally got through to you. Okay, I thought I was having a problem on my Skype. All right, the song is almost over, and we'll bring you on in just a few seconds, okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely great.
All right. Last Call, and you can find his music at datebrayusa.com. Check it out. We're back listening to, we are broadcasting as Southern Sense here on live, on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media, High Plains Media, and now American Patriot Radio. Officially, now we're up on there. Kinetic Hi-Fi, the Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina. I'm the most screwed up hostess with the mostest possible, Annie, the radio chick, along with my co-host, if I can find him in the switchboard, Curtis C.S. Bennett. Curtis, this is going to be one of those shows. I'm telling you, it's going to be one of those shows.
I'm back. I'm back.
Oh, man. And I'm going to give a little heads up before we bring our two guests on that it looks like on Saturday it's possible. We're going to be doing a little test run later on next week. Possibly I will be doing a terrestrial radio show on Saturdays, which will broadcast Saturday afternoon. I don't know exactly the time. I'm still working on what the call letters are going to be to let people know so I can put it up on our website. So this is exciting. So I'm going now, not just on podcast and Blog Talk Radio, but I'm starting to have interest that people are calling in and saying, let's get you on terrestrial radio. So that's exciting. It is so exciting. And also it's exciting now to finally be up on American Patriot Radio, since Doc promised me that like a year and a half ago. So Doc, that's right. You can drag your feet on me. That's okay. Oh, man. Let's bring our two guests on. We've got Fritzi of Red Fox Radio and Tim Burton, both also of Global Patriot Radio. Good afternoon, Kel. Ladies first.
Annie and Curtis, aren't you two sick of me already? What's going on here?
Never. It's just everything's been happening between my husband being ill, the holidays coming in, and then going to D.C. for the inauguration, and then the subjects that we were hitting that just fell right into your alley, Kel. So that's how invaluable you are, not as a friend just to me, but to us here in Radioland. How's that?
Oh, I love you too. I love you too so very much. I'm always happy to join you guys. Whenever you invite me on, it's just another highlight of my day. But I am also so very excited that you and Curtis, Annie, you have some guy joining you today. You have a wonderful guest. I've heard of this guy. What's his name? Tim Burton? No.
That's not his true name. His name is Tim Jailbird Burton. That's his name.
Well, shut my mouth and lock me away.
A matter of fact, I have that in my notes. Everywhere I have it, Tim Jailbird Burton. And I am actually going to go and change it in the show description. So I'm going to put that. And I was putting it up, I think, up in Twitter as Tim Jailbird Burton also. So here we go. It is now official up on the show page. There you go. Oh,
well,
man.
Good evening, Annie, and good evening, Curtis, and good evening, Kel. It's great to be here. It's great, Tim Jailbird Burton. I love it. Well, yeah, I mean, they do say, if you play with fire, you must expect to get burnt every now and again. But on the other hand, if you don't put your head above the parapet every now and again and speak up for what you consider to be important, not only in your own life but to the rest of humanity, I think you're remiss. And that's what I'm currently doing at the moment. I'm engaged in an epic battle. That's how I like to refer it, an epic battle of political correctness against Fiaz Magal and his legions who are arraigned against me. And yes, we are indeed in a conflict which could, in theory, result in my incarceration. Do I look worried? Does this face look worried? Well, no, it doesn't. Because, what's the worst that can happen? You stand up for what you believe in, and you have to take whatever comes as a result of that. And so my conscience is clear. I'm it may all go pear-shaped, in which case I will be appealing to you to send me lots of cakes with files in them and so on in order to get me out. That's where we are at the moment.
Well, you have a bit of a history with this gentleman that you had mentioned, Fayez Magal. But let's go back to how this all started off, where you were posting something up on Twitter, and he ended up deciding, because he runs this website called Tell Mama, that he took umbrage to some of the things that you said. And what you had posted is that you called him a mendacious, grievance-mongering Taqiyya artist. And he actually had you arrested. Am I correct? Were you actually put in handcuffs because you called him a mendacious, grievance-mongering Taqiyya artist? If you were, I've got spare handcuff keys too. If you want, I'll mail them to you.
I was arrested. Two of West Midlands' finest. I live in the West Midlands in the UK, and they have a district which is controlled by the West Midlands Police. So two of West Midlands' finest came round to interview me at home and said, "Did you say this?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And no sooner had I said, "Yes, I did," then on the third syllable, the handcuffs came out, and I was unceremoniously thrown into the back of a police car and driven off to the police station. And they interviewed me at length about what I had said. And as you quite rightly say, Annie, I called on Twitter, which is it's a famous social medium, my lord, that is frequently used by racist, bigoted Islamophobes. On Twitter, I called him a mendacious, grievance-mongering Taqiyya artist, and he didn't like that. And the thing is with Fayez Magal is he actually has connections with the police, and he has connections with the Crown Prosecution Service. So there's no doubt in my mind that he got on the phone and said, "I'm not happy with what Mr. Tim Burton is saying. Do something about it." And so they did. What can we do as a police force? Oh, I know, we can arrest him. And that's exactly what they did. And I was interviewed at length in the police station and eventually charged and prosecuted with racially aggravated harassment for calling a mendacious, grievance-mongering Taqiyya artist a mendacious, grievance-mongering Taqiyya artist. Anyway, it came to court. And I explained my case. I said, well, look, the reason I had done this is because Fayez Magal, as director of Tell Mama, was called out by a newspaper reporter, Andrew Gilligan, in June 2013. He was called out as having doctored his figures in order to increase or at least maintain his public grant from the British taxpayer, which, amounted to hundreds of thousands of pounds. I'd say probably the equivalent of $500,000 every year from 2009, which is when he started it. And I said I was outraged about this, and hence I posted what I did on Twitter, and he took exception to it, and hence the trial came about. When the trial actually came about, I explained my position, and it was accepted by the trial judge that I was merely exercising my right to freedom of speech, and that when I used the term Taqiyya, as in Taqiyya artist, it was perfectly valid, because it referred to Islamic doctrine, which is the religiously sanctioned doctrine of deception that is present within Islam. And therefore, because it's there, I have every right to refer to it. And if I call him a Taqiyya artist, it's not because I hate Muslims, it's because I'm taking exception to the fact that the guy is a lying, mendacious weasel. And I didn't actually use those words in court because I thought, well, don't push the envelope too far, Tim. It might all backfire on you. But basically that was it. And the judge agreed with me. I was fortunate to have an expert witness at the time who basically said, yeah, what Tim Burton is saying about Taqiyya is correct, and what Fiaz Magal is saying about Taqiyya is incorrect. Fiaz Magal was saying, well, it was something that was only used 1,000 years ago by Muslims, and it's only used today by racist, bigoted, right-wing Islamophobes like Tim Burton in order to defame Islam. And my expert witness said, well, no, that's not true. And the district judge in my case said, yep, I agree entirely with the point of view of Tim's legal counsel and what Tim has to say. And I was acquitted, which was great. But Fiaz Magal has never forgotten that. And he's been writing extensively on his own personal blog, bitterly complaining about the fact that he hasn't had justice. And the funny thing is that about, let's see, 2 years later, I happened to see an advertisement on his website for a job vacancy, and it was for a caseworker for Tell Mama, and this caseworker would be looking after poor victimized Muslims who had been grievously insulted by racist, bigoted Islamophobes during the course of their normal day and trying to go about their business. And this caseworker would make the most of it and put together a case which would be submitted to the police for prosecution. And I looked at this and I thought, my first thought was, this is terrible. Fiaz Magal and Tell Mama are obviously doing enough damage to the relationships between Muslims and non-Muslims, encouraging this sense of victimization. They're doing quite well enough, thank you very much, without taking on an additional caseworker. And then my second thought was, and this is possibly where I went wrong, I thought, how hard can it be? I could do that job. And I actually applied for a job as caseworker at Tell Mama, saying, I've got all the things you need, like a great understanding of Islam, and I could be a great asset to your organisation. Well, I tell you what, they didn't like it at Tell Mama at all. They didn't like it one bit, and I got a very snotty email back saying, your email to us has been passed to the Metropolitan Police, cease and desist. And I thought, well, that's a bit strong. I wrote to them and said, well, that's not very Christian of you, which, to a Muslim organisation was possibly not the best thing to write. But there you go. That's what I wrote.
It's not very Christian.
For some reason, that seemed to upset them even more. And they said, right, we're definitely, you're in trouble, you are, Mr. Burton. We're definitely going to send all this to the police, and you're going to get done for it. Well, anyway, there was a lively exchange of emails, during which time I must say I was always the epitome of politeness, because that's the kind of guy I am. And I called out Fiaz Magal for being the mendacious grievance-mongering Taqiyya artist he is, and he actually caused a complaint to be laid by the Metropolitan Police and the Crown Prosecution Service at my door. And I had, yet again, West Midlands finest on my doorstep saying, we would like you to come down to the police station, sir, if you'd be so kind. I mean, to be fair, on the second occasion, they didn't actually handcuff me, but I was left in absolutely no doubt that if I didn't go along with them to the police station, then it would be the worst for me. So I went along and gave a statement and so on, and I was charged this time with religiously aggravated harassment because I used the word Taqiyya. Now, that's a most interesting development, because although in the 2014 case I'd used the word Taqiyya, I'd had an expert to back me up and say Taqiyya is actually Islamic doctrine, and therefore the use of the word Taqiyya cannot be considered offensive by Muslims, because it's effectively it's a praiseworthy act. If a Muslim employs Taqiyya when he's speaking to non-Muslims, and Allah will smile on him. Allah won't say that's a terrible sin and you'll burn in hellfire forever. Quite the contrary. Allah will say that is a very good thing for you to do. Here's a couple of extra virgins for you on the side. Or I'm making that bit up, okay? But he will probably say that's a great thing for you to do, and consequently, because it's a praiseworthy act, a Muslim cannot be offended by it. Well, Fiaz Magal is pushing the line that, in fact, it's an offensive thing to say. And this time, what has happened is I'm being prosecuted for religiously aggravated harassment as opposed to what I was being prosecuted for previously, which was racially aggravated harassment. But the intent is the same. The intent is to stifle freedom of speech amongst people who would criticize Islam for the ideology that it is. The charge sheet says that I did what I did because I have hostility to Muslims. Well, no, I don't. My default position towards Muslims is one of great sympathy because at the end of the day, Muslims are the first victims of Islam. And on the other part of the charge sheet, it says, you have hostility to Fiaz Magal because he's a Muslim. And, well, guess what? No, I don't. I have hostility to Fiaz Magal because he's a lying, mendacious weasel who shouldn't be allowed within, 10 yards of any organisation that is seeking to control the way that non-Muslims view Islam, because he will just lie his little mendacious head off. And so we have the situation at the moment is we have a court appearance on the 27th of March this year, Monday the 27th of March, and we will be looking to not only refute what Fiaz Magal's definition of Taqiyya is, but we will be looking to see what we can turn up in the communications between Fiaz Magal and the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. And we can do this because Fiaz Magal has an official link to the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, and therefore we have a public interest to actually establish what communications have been. Well, so it should be an interesting day
That's
out.
in my notes to talk about a little bit later on, some of his connections and everything else. But Kel has pointed out that she also has a friend. Now, I'm going to ask you before I go over to Kel, is there any specific law that labels in Britain that if you criticize Islam alone, and that you've committed a crime? Or is it that if you make a criticism of any religion and Islam uses this as a cover, how does the law go?
Well, what we have is the Racial and Religious Hatred Act of 2006, whereby you are not supposed to incite hatred or violence towards people on grounds of their race or religion. And in fact, there is an exemption where you can criticise an ideology and have it protected under Article 10 of the European Court of Human Rights, which deals with free speech. And that is the defence that was employed in the 2014 case that I was involved in. Article 10 of the European Court of Human Rights basically says you have great latitude in what you can say concerning religions in general, but Islam is not a specifically protected entity. But of course, what has happened since then is that Muslims have been agitating to make Islam a protected entity in the way that Christianity is not protected and Judaism is not protected and other religions are not protected. Muslims are actually actively seeking to make criticism of Islam beyond the pale. And of course, the important thing that they're doing is that they are conflating hatred with criticism. This is one of the most important things. Just because you criticize an ideology such as Islam doesn't mean that you have hatred for the people who follow that ideology. The two things are quite separate, and it needs to be pointed out at every stage of the process that it is separate. I mean, we all know about Resolution 1618 in the United Nations in recent years, whereby the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in the United Nations has been trying very hard to outlaw criticism of Islam on the grounds that it's hateful. But of course, if that were ever to come to pass, we would be robbed of our freedom of speech when it comes to Islam. So at the moment, it hasn't been passed into law, but it's something we've got to keep an eye on. And then, of course, we've had other resolutions at United Nations since then that seek to build on that and to make it a criminal offence to criticise Islam. But at the moment, we are not forbidden in the UK to criticise Islam. As when you're talking about criticism of an ideology, you ought to be able to say exactly what you want concerning the ideology. If it comes to individual specific Muslims, and that you incite hatred towards specific Muslims, then that's something else entirely. That can be dealt with under a different section of the law altogether. And I have been very careful, in my dealings with the law and with social media, not to go out of my way to emphasise individual Muslims as to be targets of hatred. I mean, that is not what I'm about. I dislike intensely the ideology that drives Muslims to do what they do, but that's not the same thing as attacking individual Muslims. And it's a point which I intend to bring up and to emphasise to the best of my ability in court on March the 27th.
I got a question for you. In the United States, we have and I know you know this, we have the Bill of Rights, and we're protected, as far as free speech is concerned. Now, what I'm hearing about your country, there's a lot of limitations, but do you have any kind of law that protects your freedom of speech, and just how far can you go in expressing your mind in your country?
Well, you've got to be extremely careful over here. We don't have the latitude that you have in America when it comes to freedom of speech. We are nominally protected by Article 10 of the European Courts of Human Rights, which says that you can criticise an ideology, but you must not go as far as inciting hatred. Now, what constitutes inciting hatred? Of course, it begs the question. Who is going to decide what is inciting hatred and what isn't? And that's a very slippery slope to get onto. But at the moment, we can call on Article 10 and we can say, well, as long as your language does not incite violence to a particular group of people or to a particular individual, then the benefit of the doubt ought to be given to you if you end up in the kind of situation that I'm in, which is of calling into question characteristics of the Islamic ideology. But you do have to be very careful, because if you speak out in a certain way, you can run into trouble. I'm thinking about a colleague of mine. I will call him John. John, you know who you are. Who was brought into court at the beginning of last year on a charge of racially aggravated harassment, same as me, for speaking up against Islam during a rally. Now, he used the words, "We're going to have to fight these people," which is probably true. We are going to have to take steps that are not going to be the normal civilized steps that you see in a democracy, because the ideology of Islam is actually steamrollering over our rights that we have enjoyed over the last, 50 or 100 years, to the point where we are going to have no defence if we don't physically fight. But he actually went out and said that in public at a rally. I was standing right by him when he said this thing. He said, we're going to have to fight these people in order to defeat Islam. And that was taken to be religiously aggravated harassment. And I came up to support him in court as a witness. And I said in front of the court, Islam as an ideology is completely different from the religious traditions of Judaism and Christianity, and as such, it should not be considered as a religion because it doesn't follow the Golden Rule, because 51% of the Quran is concerned not with spirituality, but with how to treat the kuffar, the infidel, the unbeliever. For these reasons, Islam, really, the status of Islam ought to be revisited. That was my view. And the judge took no notice of that. He says, well, of course, Islam is a religion, and that's that. Now, when you've got that kind of attitude from the judiciary, you realise you've got an uphill struggle. I mean, it's not quite as bad as saying, well, we can't criticise the ideology at all, but we are on a slippery slope at the moment, whereby we have to be very careful about what we say. So, at the moment, you've got the First Amendment in the United States, and you should defend that strenuously. That's my recommendation, because it will come under threat. Muslims will try to get an exemption for Islam under the First Amendment, because they know that it's the only way that Islam can progress in a nation that holds free speech very highly. So we're not quite at that point here in the UK, but we are on a slippery slope. And my advice to you would be to defend freedom of speech. Absolutely, whenever you see it under threat, you must go forward very robustly and defend it. And if you don't, then you will have your ability to fight Islam severely curtailed. So, I hope that goes some way to answering your question.
All right. Well, now I want to bring Kel in on this, because Kel, you've been posting a lot of stuff in the chat room, and some of it I remember you talking about. But your friend, and I know I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Eric Brazow, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
He's
I was
facing
just speaking
jail time.
with. Yes, he is. He's facing a federal jail time. In fact, he goes to court on February 17th to plead guilty to various charges. One is a summary charge. The other three are considered, under Canadian law, indictable charges. And he has decided that he is going to plead guilty so that he only serves maybe 3 years of federal time, as opposed to having a trial by jury and ultimately being found guilty, facing up to 12 years in prison, federal time. And these charges are unbelievable, folks. The summary charge is, disturbing the peace. And this goes back to his subway talks. Eric Brazow engaged in what were called the subway talks. And he and a friend would talk about the issues of Islam on the Toronto subway system. People complained. So he was charged with disturbing the peace. Summary offense. A fine, go home, don't do it again. Eric Brazow, though, he does not know how to be quiet about the issues of Islam and how it's infiltrating the Canadian fabric. He is very much a go-getter. He's very much a counter-jihadist, but the Canadian system, it started with the police rearresting him and the police charging him with 3 other charges, including incitement to genocide, incitement to riot, and incitement to offend a minority under racially aggravated circumstances. And I'm just reading from my notes, so my apologies, folks. But these are the indictable charges. He had already spent 18 months incarceration for his subway talks, and he also did an expose, and the Toronto Sun carried this, in that he was in a Toronto bookstore. This is a Sharia-compliant bookstore. They were selling a book called A Gift for Muslim Couple. He exposed this. This book includes many Sharia-compliant mannerisms on how to treat your wife. Not only how to treat your wife, but how to subdue your wife and how to beat your wife if she steps out of turn. And he exposed this. And that landed him in hot water because that was racial incitement. People, as we know, Islam is not a race. But I spoke with him this morning, and he is indeed going to plead guilty to the charges because this is Canada and Canadian law. We have not updated our Constitution by any stretch of the imagination, and that freedom of speech, for example, would be protected. We do not have freedom of speech in Canada. And so this person, Eric Brazil, my friend, Eric Brazil, was accused of violating his right to speak out about the issues of Islam and its encroachment in Canada. I am very unhappy about this. I will be attending his hearing at the University Courthouse in Toronto on February 17th. I will be there at 9 a.m., and I will be joined by Sandra Solomon, who is an expat from Saudi Arabia, an apostate. She speaks out about Sharia law and the encroachment of madrasas popping up in our public schools in Ontario in particular. So I will be joined with Sandra, and hopefully more people will be there to support Eric Brazil. I tried to talk him out of it, but the thing is that he does have prior convictions for unrelated events in his life, and so that this would frown upon his being able to perhaps defend himself with these charges. All we can do is hope and pray. I'm very sickened by this. I'm sickened that we have to face a tribunal. We have to face a courtroom, and we have to defend ourselves for doing nothing more than speaking the truth when all the evidence is out there, people. All the evidence is right there in front of us, and we are doing nothing more than espousing the truth about what Islam is and the destructive manner of Islam. And I'm sorry, I'm a little upset because I don't want to see my friend Eric go to jail. And this is exactly what Tim is doing. And this is why I'm so proud of Tim, is that he's saying, no, I'm standing up. This is my country, damn it. I have a right to speak about what I see about me. Eric Brazil has the exact same right, too. But instead, both of these gentlemen are denigrated, and they are taken to court for doing nothing more than what? Protecting the integrity of their countries and protecting the integrity of their progeny. It makes me ill, Annie.
I don't blame you. And your friend obviously feels he can handle the couple of years. What is he facing? You said 18 months, or is it more?
Well, he had already served 18 months for prior convictions related to his speaking out about Islam. In this case, he's pleading guilty, and he is looking at about 3 years of federal time. He will probably serve his time in federal prison.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It depends. If he is convicted, he's pleading guilty, so yeah, he'll be sentenced. depending on what prison he goes to, he may or may not have open custody status, which will be harmful to his personal being. I think that if word in the prison system, wherever he is serving his time, if word gets out that this person is incarcerated for this offense, quote-unquote offense, that he will be targeted by a certain other community within that prison. That's my biggest worry.
Yeah, that is a huge worry, and 3 years is a very, very long time. You know, it's crazy. Thankfully, we do have our First Amendment, and we are trying to make sure we adhere to it. Because if anyone remembers last year, Loretta Lynch, the former, thankfully, I will stress former Attorney General, had stated she would prosecute anyone that criticized Islam. We didn't see any prosecutions because obviously that didn't go over too well with people. We've heard, time after time with other communities complaining about harassment of Muslims, and yet each time those reports are checked out, they're all deemed to be false. And Tim, this is something that you've been dealing with Tell Mama UK. What exactly is Tell Mama, and the other various organizations that Fayez Mughal has? Because I pulled this up from the Jewish Defense League UK and started reading about this. I'm calling him a spider in the center of a web, is basically what he is.
Well, that's actually not a bad description, because he has got various organisations on the go. Tell Mama is only one of those organisations. He runs a group called Faith Matters, and Tell Mama is merely a project within one of those within the Faith Matters organisation. But he's got fingers in various other pies, let us say, and when he establishes a particular project, then he goes all out to demonise those people who have valid criticisms in order to promote a sense of Muslim victimhood, which wouldn't matter so much if it wasn't completely false. He pulls in examples of Muslim anti-Muslim hatred that are completely untrue. We had something I think it was in the summer of this year, I think it was July last year, whereby a young Muslim woman complained that somebody had come up to her in the street and they'd ripped her hijab off and verbally abused her and so on. And this was treated as gospel by Fayez Mughal's organisation, even though a police investigation found it to be entirely untrue, and that the woman herself pleaded guilty to wasting police time because it was entirely untrue. But even after she pleaded guilty and was convicted for wasting police time, Fayez Mughal's organisation continued to promote this example of being anti-Muslim hatred. Now that's just one example in the last 12 months. I'm sure there are others. I haven't got them to hand, but the point is that we have a situation here where Fayez Mughal is getting away with propagating falsehoods and getting rewarded for it. He's still getting, and this is the interesting thing, that when in 2014, when he was called out by Andrew Gilligan of the Daily Telegraph for manipulating the figures of his organisation in order to get taxpayers' money, he temporarily had his funding withdrawn. Now, at the time, I didn't know it was just temporary. I thought anybody at that sort of level who was committing that kind of fraud, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year of each year of taxpayers' money, being called out for fraud at that level, he would not only have his funding withdrawn, he would be on his way to prison in very short order. Well, that didn't happen. Not only did he escape being prosecuted for fraud, but quietly, over the next couple of years, his funding was reinstated. And so he's now doing exactly the same as he was before, trying to make out that Muslims are victims, where in fact they are actually the perpetrators of most so-called Muslim hate crimes. He's got his money back. He's continuing to perpetuate this myth of Muslim victimhood, and we are all paying the price for it. So I think that he's got a lot to answer for, and I think that we really ought to be extremely careful about people who go out of their way to say, well, yeah, Muslims are victims. Well, no, they're not. For the most of the time, Muslims are perpetrators. Muslims are the people who espouse hate towards Christians and Jews. When it comes to Western civilized countries, Muslims are the predominant persecutors of Jewish people in particular. If you're a Jewish person and you're afraid to go out onto the street wearing your kippah or other signs of affiliation to the Jewish faith, the reason you're afraid to do that is thanks to the Muslim community, who are very likely to come up to you in the street and accost you and verbally abuse you. If you're a Christian in a Middle Eastern Muslim dominated country, you are very likely to be persecuted and to have the sign for I can't remember what the sign is now, but if it's sprayed on your door, that marks you out as a Christian household, and you are then marked for death. And if you don't leave very quickly, you'll be killed. That is certainly the case in Iraq and Syria, and because of that, if we allow Muslims to continue doing what they're doing, we are going to be steamrolled by Islamic supremacism, and they will drive out every civilized aspect of this civilization of our individual Western countries and Western civilization in particular, that our forefathers, our ancestors, spilt blood and spent treasure defending. That's all going to be given away, and I don't see any good reason why that should happen, and that's why I'm standing up. That's why Eric Brazeau has been standing up. Personally, if I was in the same country as Eric Brazeau, I'd be there supporting him at his trial, and the only reason that there aren't more people there doing that in Canada is that I don't think he's really got a good publicity PR agent to publicise what's actually been happening. But it's absolutely appalling. I was only apprised of it this evening, about 1 hour before the show, and I was absolutely appalled by it. But Kel, as always, is stepping up to the plate, and she is going to be there when his case comes up on the 17th. So I say hats off to Kel for everything she's doing for Eric Brazeau. And anybody else in Canada who's listening, please go out there and support him, because it's people like him who put their lives and their liberty on the line against Islamic supremacism, and they need our support. So please go out there and do that.
Oh, Kel, I've got a question for you now, Kel. Is there some place that the average citizen, even if you're an American or a Briton, can write to this court to demand leniency or see that the charges are thrown out?
We can absolutely address the Attorney General and plead our case in that we can forward an argument. We believe that the sentencing is harsh, the charges are harsh, and we, as respectful citizens, ask the Attorney General to review the case. Yeah, we can.
All right, is there an address or name or something that you can post? If you put it up on my Facebook page for the show, somewhere that people can look at it. If they go to Facebook and look for Southern Sense, they can see where they can write to this Attorney General, and maybe we can get some letters out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We, I have it right here, in fact. It is, if you want to write the Attorney General, you go courtesy of the Minister of Justice in Canada, and they will receive your letters. Let me get the proper address for you, Annie.
Yeah, like I said, put it up
on my... As a matter of fact, even better would be to contact the Attorney General of Ontario. That would be even better. And there is a contact right here, folks. And I will put this in the chat room for you, Annie.
All right, and also if you can, post it up on the Southern Sense Facebook page for me so that the people listening in can go to my Facebook page. There's a link on the southern-sense.com website, so just go southern-sense, put a little dash in the middle, Southern Sense, put a dash.com, and I'll have that up later on today, if not tomorrow. And I'm going to probably put up a Facebook event that will end on the 16th for people to get their letters out. If you have a fax number, Cal, or an email to them, also we'll put that up there. So if someone wants to send something last minute on the 16th or 17th, they can do that too. I think we can get a ball rolling on this and maybe see if we can turn the tide for Eric. How's that sound?
I hope so, because this is just really, really devastating. In that, what Vito Esposito, God bless him, Vito of Global Patriot Radio, what he said is that there are people being pardoned under Obama's final kick in the can. He pardons people like Bradley Manning, but people like Eric Brazeau and Tim Burton are facing the courts for doing honest work. Bradley Manning was a traitor to the country, and I cannot believe that he was granted this pardon. I wonder if we'll see the same for Eric or Tim. It just boggles the mind. Oh, you know, Curtis, I don't know. You write so much about this sort of thing, Curtis, and you are so prolific in your viewpoints and your insights. This must give you, Curtis, so much more writing material.
Believe me, there. But I have a question for you and Tim, and you can go first, Cal. Do you think the expansion of Islam in the United States has been slowed down by the presidency of Trump? And in what way?
Yeah. I think that the encroachment of Islam is going to be vastly slowed down because Donald Trump yesterday was working on the issues of national security. Now, what everybody was hearing was the wall. He's going to build the wall on the southern border. And that is absolutely true, and he will. I think what we're going to see is him addressing the issues of Islam, and that if he declares the Muslim Brotherhood as an outlawed entity, then we're going to see a lot of these Muslim Brotherhood front groups shut down. He's already wanting to put a moratorium on any immigration from the Middle East, a strife-laden countries in the Middle East. He wants to put, I think it's 120 days, he wants to put a moratorium on the migrant importation right now. And that's all he's doing. There's a lot of talk about him putting back together a Muslim list. This was instituted under, I believe, the National Security Act after 9/11. Homeland Security actually enacted this, and they put together a department that would portfolio anybody coming in from the Middle East. Now, that was disbanded by Obama, I believe, in 2011, so I'm not too sure. If I'm wrong about the dates, anybody, please correct me. But there was talk that President Trump wanted to reinstate this list, as it were. That's not the case. No, all he wants to do at this point is put a moratorium on the acceptance of refugees, quote unquote, and he wants to figure out exactly how these programs are working. But with his proposal to declare the Muslim Brotherhood an outlawed entity, that is going to go a far way, Curtis, big time, far way for the American people, for the further safety of the American people, because this will also, like I said, shut down front groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations. It might shut down the Student Muslim Association, which was established in 1963, which should never have come into fruition in the first place. So, yes, I think that you're going to see a lot of huge changes when it comes to the Islamization in the United States.
Well,
All
Tim?
right. Tim, what's your thought?
We lose Tim? Tim, did we lose you?
My apology. We're here. I'm here. It's a little bit different over here in the UK. We have a leader, Theresa May, who has not yet fully embraced the implications of what it means to have the Islamic ideology alive and kicking here in the UK. She still refers to Islam as a religion of peace, and I think she was over in Tennessee only this week. In fact, it might even have been just in the last couple of days, talking about Islam as a religion of peace, and that the thing that needs to be defeated is radical Islamism. Well, excuse me, but radical Islamism is in fact Islam under another name. There is no real difference between radical Islamism, as Theresa May expounds, and Islam. Islam is red in tooth and claw. The policies that are expounded by what she calls radical Islamism are in fact mainstream Islam, and there's no getting away from it. If you read what is written in the Quran and the Hadith and the Sirah, the Quran and Sunnah together, you cannot escape that conclusion. The prospect of Islam being somehow divided into a benign section and a malevolent section is a total fiction. And as long as people in positions of power, like Theresa May, continue to espouse those false platitudes, then we are never going to get anything constructive done. Well, what can I say? It's something I've written about at length, and I can only continue to put forward the point of view which I hope will be accepted in due course by most people. I mean, there are signs that this point of view is being recognised. You look at Eastern Europe now, and you're seeing the leaders of Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. They're actually saying, yeah, Islam is a thoroughly undesirable ideology. We don't want it in our country. We don't want mosques. We don't want Muslims. We don't want anything to do with it. And we are going to withdraw from anything that the European Union tries to force on us in order to take Muslim refugees from predominantly Muslim countries. So that's a start. But we have a long way to go towards getting that point of view accepted over here in the United Kingdom. So the bottom line is, to your question, is are we doing enough to curtail Islamic immigration? Are the policies that we have sufficient to deter Muslims from coming to this country? The answer is no, not yet. But I think public opinion is turning. I think we're seeing with the advent of Trump, we're going to, here in Europe, we're going to be looking very closely at what Trump is doing and the effect that his policies will have. And we'll be saying to ourselves, hey, yeah, you know what? If he can do it in the United States, we should be able to do it over here. And we've got European elections in France and Holland next year that I think are going to be quite decisive. And I've heard today and although I haven't really analysed this to any great extent, I've heard today that there are upheavals in Austria concerning the elections they had during 2016 and how they might rerun those elections because of, I don't know, there have been problems. And we very nearly had a sensible right-of-centre government installed in Austria in 2016, and they were defeated by a matter of a few thousand votes, and I think that there are things happening that are going to correct that. But we've got a long way to go. But I think I remember a couple of years ago saying that we only need one country to stand up and say this is enough. And like dominoes, the rest of Western civilization will follow. And I think Trump, in charge of America, provides that leading domino. And I think when he says that things are going to change around here, that the effects will be felt worldwide throughout Western civilization, and in a good way. So we're not quite there yet in the UK, but I'm very optimistic about what might happen.
Tim, I'm going to get into what's going on with Brexit also, but we had a caller sitting here rather patiently from California. Let me bring this individual in online. California, you're on the air live with Southern Sense. To whom am I speaking?
Well, how you doing? My name is Steve.
Hi, Steve. And you have a question or a comment?
Well, I wanted to just thank you guys for the show today, and I think that the opinion from England is really, really good for the show. So thank you, Tim, for being on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, I have some family. I have some family who's in England, and I don't think that they really understand the magnitude of what's going on, especially with the Trump cabinet. And there's lots of things that really are happening that they should probably be aware of. You know, we have folks like Tillerson, Munchin, Sessions, all these folks in there that are getting approved, and the family I have in the UK, they're not really aware. What's the sentiment of the folks in the UK?
Well, I think that the implications are largely being hidden from the general public by the mainstream media over here. I mean, obviously they have to report that Trump is now the president of the United States. It's difficult to get away from that. But the mainstream media, in particular the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, are going out of their way to play down the significance, and they're going out of their way to make sure that Trump is being demonized at every opportunity. I remember when the Women's March was being held a few days ago, and all these women in various cities right across the Western civilization were protesting against Trump. The BBC was saying, well, this is a terrible indictment of Trump's policies and how awful Trump really is in all the things that he said and done. But it wasn't really an independent analysis, and I was absolutely appalled at what the BBC had to say, because they were really quite biased against Trump. So if you see people in the United Kingdom who aren't terribly enthused about what's going on, it's because of the negative effect of the left-wing media over here. And the BBC wields a lot of power, because for decades the BBC have been accepted as the independent voice of truth in a world full of lies. And, when I was growing up, that's the way it was presented to me. And as I did my research as I was growing up, I came to recognize that was actually true. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, that was very true. But then something happened to the BBC. It got taken over by a bunch of, I hesitate to use the words communists, but certainly left-wing leaning people, and they started to put a bias, a spin on the news that was against anything that approached right of centre common sense. And that is something that we've seen now over the last 20 or 30 years, and it's starting to have a serious effect on public opinion. So, yeah, we are seeing now a situation where common sense is returning to the political landscape in the United States with Trump and everything he's doing. And people like the BBC here in the UK, probably the major former of opinion here in the UK, they are against everything that is happening, and the reporting reflects it. It's naked bias. It's quite appalling. It's not what I would expect from a supposedly independent broadcaster, but, there it is. So if you've got relatives in the United Kingdom who don't seem terribly enthusiastic about what Trump is doing, it's because, in my view, it's highly likely to be because of the bias of the left-wing mainstream media over here. But all you can do is talk to them and say, well, Trump is doing these things, and the chances are that with what he's doing, he's going to have a major, major positive impact on everything the United States stands for over the next 4 years. And you want to take everything he's doing and look at well, not just look at, but explain to your friends and colleagues and relatives in the United Kingdom how it is that what Trump's doing is actually a positive thing. I'll tell you what, you could do a lot worse than go to Scott Adams' blog. People who know me get sick of me saying, "Oh no, not Scott Adams again." Scott Adams is a prolific writer. He's also very skilled in the arts of persuasion and hypnosis. And you might think, well, what's that got to do with the price of fish? Well, the fact is that he predicted everything that was going to happen in the United States presidential election up to and including the election of Donald Trump, which in my view makes him somebody who ought to be looked at and whose views ought to be taken into account. So Scott Adams' blog, if you go to that, just Google it, you'll find it easily enough. You will see a very persuasive explanation of what has happened and why in the United States over the past 18 months or so. And I would actually use that when you talk to your friends and colleagues and relatives in the United Kingdom. I'd actually use that and say, well, forget what the left-wing media are telling you. Look at it from Scott Adams' point of view. And I think if you do that, the scales will fall from their eyes. And that's really what you want in any kind of discussion when it comes to politics. You really want to bring about in your listeners the sensation of scales falling from their eyes, because there's so much deception in politics, or at least there has been up to now. And we're now presented with something which is completely different from what we have been told by the mainstream media for the last 30 or 40 years. And if you use Scott Adams' blog as an example, you will be, I promise you will be very pleasantly surprised about when it comes to the effect that it has on people that you're talking to here in the UK. So that would be my advice to you, sir. And thank you for calling into this show. It's been a pleasure. I'd say it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I realise I've done most of the speaking, but it's good that you've called in. So I hope that helps.
Well, you know what, Tim, you went on so long, I think he fell asleep and dropped off. But Steve, thank you for the call.
Possibly. Quite Steve, possibly, yeah. I mean, that happens a lot.
But Steve Cole did drop off, so I wish him...
Yeah, that's right, Tim. You've been boring me for 4 years on the air.
Yeah, well, I do apologise, but sometimes, there are things that you have to say that can't just be said in one or two sentences. And, if you try and say it in one or two sentences, you will not convey seriousness of what it is that you're trying to say. So, all right, I apologise. What else can I do when faced with such two lovely women? I'm a thorn between two roses.
No, actually, I love when my guest does ramble on because it gives me time to close my eyes and get a cat nap. Oh man!
Oh well, okay.
You know what? When you ask Tim a question, you get a dissertation. There you go.
True
but
story.
you know what? You do walk away with another nugget of knowledge. And Tim, you're surrounded by two beautiful women. Well, two beautiful women are surrounded by two beautiful men. You and Curtis. There you go.
I should have worn my rubber boots. We need to pass around the rubber boots here today. All right. You mentioned Theresa May, and I sometimes can't make heads or tails with her because, she sounds like she's going to be like a Margaret Thatcher type of person. And then she turns around and does something that completely baffles me, such as there seems to be, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, this was in, believe it or not, my resource was Tell Mama UK.
Oh, well, what can I say? If you're going to use Tell Mama UK as a resource, there's no hope for you.
No, but
all right, tell us what it says.
What he is claiming is that Britain wants to ban the burqa. Now, he's claiming that Theresa May will not support this. What is your take on her, and is this more Taqiyya that we're looking at?
Well, I think you can certainly take it as read that when Fiaz Magal or Tell Mama says anything, there'll be a certain element of Taqiyya in there, no matter what. I mean, they will spin any piece of news in order to be favourable to Islam. As far as banning the burqa is concerned, well, I think that's largely a red herring. I mean, we do have a principle in our society where we do like to see the faces of the people that we're talking to. I mean, call us unreasonable, racist, bigoted Islamophobes, but when you look at people and you see the expressions on their faces, you can form an impression on whether to trust them or not. And if somebody's wearing a burqa, then you have no opportunity of forming that impression. And I think that is a bad thing. But when it comes to formulating this in law, is Theresa May likely to implement it? Well, I'm not so sure. She's very much hedging her bets on every issue that we've talked about it. I mean, when she was asked about, what does Brexit mean, the leaving the European Union, she famously replied, Brexit means Brexit, which told nobody anything about anything. And she's been very mysterious about the whole concept of leaving the European Union ever since. So when she comes out and says, or if it is implied by a third party that she's going to ban the burqa, I think you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. I personally, I think the burqa ought to be banned because we operate in our Western civilization with a certain level of trust, and in order to establish that trust between two people, you need to see their facial expressions. That you cannot establish a level of trust without seeing people's faces. I mean, that is just basic human psychology, all right? There's no getting away from that. So if you've got something that gets in the way of it, you're going to reduce the level of trust, and that's a bad thing. So my personal view is that, yeah, it would be great if the burqa was banned. Is Theresa May going to do it? Well, I don't know that she would. I think she's much more concerned about trying to create a sense of unity and involvement with minority groups such as Muslims. I personally think that's entirely wrong. I think she should be giving Muslims collectively a good slap around the face and saying, come on, if you don't start playing according to the rules, we're going to beat you out. That's what some people out there will be saying, well, it's a good job you're not Prime Minister, Tim, because you would you would probably be responsible for the persecution of various minority groups. And well, at the end of the day, I think we have a choice to make. We can either maintain our Western civilization as it's been a force for good over the last couple of 100 years, and all right, it's not perfect, but I think that it's been better than anything that Islam has ever produced or is ever likely to produce in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, and all the other things that we currently take for granted. And Islam would reverse all that as soon as it has the opportunity. So I think Islam has to be stamped on. But I don't think Theresa May is the person to stamp on it. Yeah, I hear you. I know. I hear you in the background saying Tim Burton for Prime Minister. I know. I'm taking all that on board. But yeah, that's
we're
where
throwing
we are.
Flowers at your feet.
I'm throwing something at his feet, but it sure is not flowers. Well, yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. I don't think I want to ask.
The mistake that I believe most world leaders and a lot of people from countries like Canada and the UK is that they try to equate Islam with other peaceful religions, and it's nothing like that. I mean, I know over in Great Britain they had the issue with the Catholics and the Protestants, but that wasn't based on world dominance. And Islam is a religion that's based on world dominance. That's what makes it so threatening, a religion. And some people would even call it a cult. But the thing is, these leaders have got to wake up and see Islam for what it really is.
Well, ideally, I mean, in an ideal world, we would have absolutely no problem in identifying Islam as something other than a religion. Now, as it stands here in the UK at the moment, the UK law treats Islam as a religion. Now, rightly or wrongly, that is the way it's treated. And if you go up in front of a UK judge, he will say, well, of course, Islam is a religion. And I know this from experience because that's what happened to me when I made the point back in the beginning part of 2016. I was told that no matter what I thought, Islam was a religion. But in fact, there are good philosophical arguments for saying that it's not a religion at all. And one of them is the Golden Rule. Now, the Golden Rule is something that's been used for thousands of years to determine the difference between what is a religion and what is not. And the Golden Rule says, do unto others as you would have done unto you. And that is a pretty much universal statement that people have used for thousands of years to determine the difference between what is a religion and what is not. And pretty much every religion in the world, certainly that exists today, and to the best of my knowledge that's existed in the past, follows the Golden Rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you. But Islam does not follow that rule. Islam says, we are going to divide the world into two. You've got Dar al-Islam, which is lands ruled by Islam. You've got Dar al-Harb, which is lands that are ruled by the pesky infidel. And it is the duty of every Muslim to expand Dar al-Islam until it entirely encompasses all the lands that are currently ruled by the infidel, Dar al-Harb. Now, that is in direct contravention of the Golden Rule. And for that reason alone, Islam should not be considered as a religion. Now, you could argue that maybe it should be considered as a cult, or maybe it should be considered as a political ideology. Personally, I think it's both of those. But what it is most manifestly not is a religion because of the Golden Rule. And I think that if we revisited the status of Islam in UK law and in laws around the world and said, well, hang on a second, we've been making the assumption that Islam is actually some kind of a religion, and we've based all our laws over the past few hundred years on this. Maybe we ought to revisit it. And if we did revisit it, maybe we should apply the golden rule and say, well, hang on a second, Islam isn't really a religion at all. It's a political ideology, a totalitarian political ideology, a totalitarian supremacist political ideology that has nothing in common with the Abrahamic religions of Judaism and Christianity, and it should be treated as such, like Nazism was, or communism. It should be treated as an ideology which has to be fought in order to make sure that all the advances that we have made over the past decades or centuries are not suddenly brought to a halt. And I think that people are need to be apprised of this and need to stand up and say, well, hang on, all the lawmakers in our various Western countries, we should be saying, hang on, let's have this reviewed. I'm not holding my breath for this happening anytime soon, by the way, but it is certainly something that I'm pushing forward, and I think that in due course it will happen, but at the moment there's a lot of resistance to it. So once again, I'm using 2,000 words to respond to something that probably could have been answered in 3. But there you go.
Well, today Theresa May was meeting with Trump. She was just going in to meet with him just before we went on air, so I wasn't able to watch what was going on. They were still in the photo shoot. But she actually said she had criticized comments made by Donald Trump in relation to women and told him that they were unacceptable. Some of those he himself has apologized for, she claims. But they're meeting today, and supposedly they're going to be discussing future trading relationships. Now, you got to remember, Trump today yesterday pulled out of TPP. So people are starting to quake in their boots. Trading relationships between the United States and Britain, as well as NATO. And then challenges such as defeating terrorism. Now, it's interesting that here we're talking about you going to trial for criticizing your buddy in Tell Mama. We've got Eric facing 3 years in jail for criticizing Islam. Now, I'm just wondering how much she's going to take away, do you think, from that meeting with him? Because, he's going to lay it down and just, hey, we got a huge problem here.
Well, I don't want to guess ahead of events what's going to happen. What I think will certainly be the case is that Trump will be putting down his point of view, which is going to be very uncompromising when it comes to Islamic terrorism, and the ingress of Muslims from Islamic countries. He's going to say, well, I'm not going to have it anymore. Theresa May, I think, has got different priorities. She doesn't want to upset the Muslim community here in the UK. I mean, you can tell that from the decisions that she's made over the past 3 years. When she was Home Secretary, she banned, for example, Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller from coming to the UK, and they wanted to come over to pay their respects to Lee Rigby, who was brutally murdered by a couple of Muslims in Main Street in Woolwich. There was Michael Abdelajo and another Michael, whose surname I forget. They murdered him in cold blood on the streets of
Abdulwali?
I've got be.
Abdulajayo. I can't pronounce it.
Adabalachi.
I've got two Abadabas.
Well, anyway,
two Abadabas.
The two Michaels murdered Lee Rigby, and one of them was caught on camera saying, "We did this because of Islam," and he quoted Quran chapter 9, verse 29, which meant that you could see quite clearly that what he did in the name of Islam. And that, at the time, was widely put down by the government. They were saying, oh, this is nothing to do with Islam. Well, guess what? A good rule of thumb is when somebody in government says this is nothing to do with Islam, you can be pretty sure that it's everything to do with Islam. And so it proved when he was taken to court and he was convicted of this heinous murder. The judge said to him, well, you know, you betrayed your Islamic heritage. And the guy went absolutely ballistic in court. I think he jumped over the dock and tried to kill the judge. And he had to be physically restrained because, of course, he was quite right. What he did was in the name of Islam, and the judge was quite wrong. And, well, all I can say is that Theresa May is not minded at the moment to upset the Muslim community over here. And I think it will take a little bit more persuasion. I don't think that going to visit Trump in the United States will suddenly have the effect of scales falling from her eyes.
No epiphany.
Which I think would be... No epiphany. I don't think so. But I do think, you know, it's a start. She's over there. She needs to be exposed to points of view which actually accord with reality, rather than the fantasy political bubble that she's been operating in for probably the past 10 or 15 years as Home Secretary and now as Prime Minister. So I'm very pleased that she's over there talking to people like Trump who have the capacity to burst her bubble and make her see reality. Whether she will or not, of course, is open to question. But hey, you know, we all live in hope, don't we?
Well, you know, I want to bring it up to you and Kel, because I'm looking down at the clock when I'm coming down to the last end of the show, and I've got a bunch of other stuff I want to hit with you guys. But I mentioned Brexit earlier, and Theresa May is pushing this Article 50 process, and she put in like a 133-word proposal to Parliament to push forward the Brexit procedure, which I believe she has a deadline the end of March. And now I'm hearing Parliament is up in arms. They got people that are walking out. Wait a minute, what was that name? Tulip Sadiq quit.
Oh, Tulip Sadiq, yeah.
Please. Yeah. And she happens to be Muslim. What's going on with the Brexit and the Article 50? And what? We don't even know what the heck is going on.
Okay, well, I'll try and be brief on this because I know time is ticking down. But basically, yeah, I know. When you hear the words Tim Burton and try to be brief in the same sentence,
it's an oxymoron.
I know. Yeah, that's right. It's an oxymoron. But the bottom line is that there is a great deal of opposition in Parliament to the process of Brexit. The people have spoken. The referendum has taken place, and we voted 52 percentage points to 48 to leave. But it needs to be ratified through a vote in Parliament. And the Supreme Court has actually said as much. They said you can't leave the European Union through Brexit without putting it through Parliament, because the laws that are going to need to be changed will directly impact on British citizens. So therefore it has to go through the process of being debated and voted on in Parliament. Now, at the end of the day, it might not matter too much. We might still get the result that we want, but there is a possibility that Parliament might arrange things in order to frustrate the will of the people. That's not impossible. And if that actually happens, I think we will see some civil conflict, because we have voted to leave, and we expect our government, our Parliament, to carry through the will of the people. But it's entirely possible that they may seek to frustrate it. And the next couple of months, I think, are going to be crucial. And I wouldn't like to predict which way it's going to go. But if you have any shares in a tin hat company, I suggest that you you invest in that in short order, because I think we're going to see a lot of shrapnel and flak flying about, and those people with tin hats are probably going to be better off than others. So I foresee a lot of problems because of parliamentary opposition. I'd like to think that the whole process of Brexit is going to go through unimpeded, but I think that there are so many people out there with vested interests in positions of authority that it might be quite difficult. But we all we can do is keep pushing things forward the way we think is best, and if it means torches and pitchforks on the streets, well, I'll be out there with the rest of them.
Don't worry, Tim. We're going to work on the caps for you. We'll get the nitwits working on it for you. What color do you want? Do you want the most popular pink?
No, I don't. And in fact, the reason I don't want pink, I'll tell you this now before we get close to shutting down. The reason I don't want pink is that pink is not a good colour for a protest movement. Any kind of protest movement, you want a primary colour such as red, where Trump said, "Let's make America great again." He got the baseball caps all out in red. With the white logo, that is actually a very good colour for a protest movement. But pink is a calming colour. It's a colour that people look at and they think, what am I getting all worked up about? And consequently, any protest movement that is based on pink is doomed to failure. Now, that's not just my point of view. I'm referring to Scott Adams' blog. You can take a look at your leisure. But it's a point of view with which I subscribe quite substantially. So I definitely wouldn't want pink. If I was going to protest, I'd want a primary colour. And red would probably be my choice.
That's why I live in a red state.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to hit, are you going on this, Curtis, or are we moving on to something else? Because I have one last thing I want to hit before we end up going off air.
Well, I just wanted to say to Kel that her situation with her friend up there, I just wish it was something we could do to help that country get more on a conservative path and to come around, and seeing what Islam is really about. There's no reason for this guy to be going to jail, That's all I want to say.
Exactly. And Curtis, I so appreciate those kind words from you. We're living in a very strange universe up here in Canada right now. And there were a lot of elements that collided. Ultimately, we ended up with Justin Trudeau as the Prime Minister of Canada. We have people coming of age, and this includes the millennials and the snowflakes and the progressives and the influence of Islam, the mosque with vote, Justin Trudeau's globalism, his adhering to any policy passed by the United Nations. We did not have a seat on the United Nations Security Council. And when they passed 2334, Resolution 2334, we did not have a voice in that because we do not have a security seat. But I can guarantee you, Curtis, that if Canada had Pierre, my apologies, that's his crazy dad, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin Trudeau probably would have voted with this resolution for a two-state solution in Israel. We are in a lot of trouble up here in Canada. People don't realize just how bad it's getting. It's going to get worse the more this person stays in power. And Curtis, you're right. Because of the auspices of all of these influences, people like my friend Eric Brazil is facing jail time for doing what? Talking about the issues of Islam. Thank you, Curtis.
You're welcome.
Wow. There's so much to go over, and we're running way out of time here. But I wanted to ask, because we are discussing Islam and its influence in our culture now, not just here in the United States or Canada, but throughout all of Western civilization, and its effect here on you, Tim, directly in Britain, the effect on Eric over in Canada. You guys are actually facing jail time for exercising your freedom of speech. And we don't realize how precious that is. And there is a Dr. Gavin Ashenden, and he was, I'm sure this rings a bell, I hope it does with you, Tim, but he was one of the Queen's chaplain who recently resigned just last week because he was instructed to read a passage from the Quran that denies Jesus's divinity. And Christ, known as Isu in the Quran, is mentioned 17 times. And one of them, which is, deny Jesus the Son of God, such was Jesus the Son of Mary. Wait a minute. They have actually several verses here that, threaten violence to a person who feels that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is divine. And here, a Queen's chaplain is being told he has to read this verse. This is an article from the Europe newspaper, The Telegraph, by Camelia Turner. And she writes, he said that he had to make a choice between important honor of continuing in the role of royal chaplain and having the ability to speak out on matters he felt strongly about. I think it's clear to me that accepting the role of chaplain to the Queen does not give one a platform where one can speak controversially in the public square, he said. So in those circumstances, I think one has to choose between whether one wants to accept an important honor or whether one chooses to continue a debate in the public square. Gee, does this sound a little familiar to Tim? I am fairly clear in my own mind that my duty to my conscience, to my order, to my understanding of Christianity, and my vocation is that I am supposed to be speaking out in the public square on behalf of the Christ I serve. A Buckingham Palace spokesman said Dr. Gavin Ashenden has tendered his resignation from the honorary position of chaplain to the Queen, effective immediately. Wow.
Well, I think that, yes, indeed. I mean, it's extremely significant that somebody who has risen to the ranks in the clergy of becoming the Queen's chaplain has felt that he's had to speak out in this way. I mean, there are people who say that if you get to rise to those ranks, then you shouldn't speak out about controversial subjects. But when you've got senior clergy in the rest of the Church of England who are acting in such an immoral way, and I use the word advisedly, they are allowing Muslims to enunciate the Islamic prayer in a cathedral, which denies that Jesus was the Son of Mary and so on. That should not be allowed. I mean, why have a religion if you're going to allow people of a different religion to take precedence in your own houses of worship? You may as well just pack up and go home. So I think the Reverend Gavin Ashenden was quite right to speak out. And in fact, there's an article in the Gatestone Institute over the last day or two which says that he ought to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for what he has done. He's stood up in the face of craven clerical misrepresentation of what Islam is, and with all this so-called outreach to Islam, to interfaith outreach, which is supposedly going to build bridges between Islam and Christianity. This is all being touted as a good thing, but in fact it's entirely destructive. And the reason I say it's entirely destructive is when you're building bridges, the very first thing that you do when you're building a bridge is to try and make sure you know what is on both sides of the bridge when you build it. So let's say you're building a bridge over a river and you check out the ground on your side of the river and it seems pretty solid. You check out the ground on the other side of the river and it's swampy and marshy. Now, are you going to build a bridge? Well, of course you're not, because a bridge will never stand the test of time if one of its supports is on swampy and marshy ground. Well, that's a perfect analogy for when you try and build bridges between Christianity and Islam. Christianity is built on sound theological principles, which, in my view, will stand the test of time for millennia to come. But Islam is is an ideology which is built on truth, half-truth and deceit. And any examination of Islam will immediately cause it to crumble. And I've often said, if you shine a light on Islam, it's like shining the light of disinfectant on something, and it'll cause it to disappear. And then Islam will crumble if it's subject to the kind of rigorous examination that Christianity is subject to. So therefore, you cannot build bridges between Islam and Christianity. It's pointless. There's absolutely no point in trying to do it whatsoever. So the Reverend Gavin Ashington has put his career on the line as Queen's chaplain, and that must have taken, a lot of soul searching to do that and say, here am I. I've spent my whole life, my whole career, building up to the point where I'm now the Queen's chaplain, and I'm putting that all in jeopardy because of something some idiot cleric said in Gloucester Cathedral a few days ago. But that is the kind of person that you need when you're talking about important issues like this. And I personally would have no problem with him being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. All right, that may not come about, but I do think that he ought to be recognised for what he has stood up for. He stood up for a very important principle, which is that Christianity has a set of morals, ethics and values that are totally, completely different to Islamic morals and ethics and values, and we ought to point this out. There's no point trying to fudge it and trying to come to compromise, because that will only end in tears. What he's done is the morally correct thing to do, and I think he ought to be recognised and rewarded for it, instead of being demonised and cast out from the position that he's in. I do hope that in due course his position will be recognised and he will be reinstated in well, I suppose I'm not holding my breath, because our clergy have largely abdicated the religious playing field, as it were. They've largely abdicated that to Islam, which I think is entirely regrettable. But I do hope that in time he'll be vindicated.
Well, I do also, because when we had, I believe this was 2 years ago, there was a Muslim prayer service in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., which is an Anglican church. And I'm sure you're aware there's been a split in the Anglican church.
Oh, yeah.
You've got the conservative movement, which I belong to, and then you've got the progressive movement. So there's a little bit of a war between the Episcopalians here. And when I was leaving our church service right after that happened, that Friday service, my then rector at the time, I asked him, I made a little comment about that, and the look on his face, the anger that showed, and he was trying to keep as calm as possible, and I just looked at his eyes and says, "You just said it all without saying a word." I mean, how can they be so stupid to not know by having that Friday church service, they have just desecrated the church? There's no other way to describe it.
Yeah. No, it's desecration. It's absolutely desecration, and they don't realise it, because they think that the goal of building bridges between Christianity and Islam is all important, and they lose sight of the fact that Islam is a thoroughly evil ideology. You don't want to build bridges with it. You want to take a flamethrower to it and basically turn up the heat until it entirely disappears. Building bridges with Islam is a fool's errand. And unfortunately, there is a school of thought in with our clerics in our Christian ideology that says, well, we ought to accommodate Islam. Well, no, it's entirely wrong. It will end in tears, and it will get us absolutely nowhere. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that, you've encountered that kind of experience, because there's an awful lot of clerics that think they're doing good by trying to build bridges between Christianity and Islam. But it will end in tears. I promise you that. You heard it here first on Southern Sense Radio. Well, I may have mentioned it before, but yeah, it will end in tears. So there you go.
Well, Cal, you and Tim have a show together. I know you've been putting it up in the chat room. Keep on putting it up in the chat room. I've got links. You know how I do the links on the show page, so people listening to the podcast later can click on your name, click on Tim's name. And, Tim, before I forget, very, very important, you've got a fundraising for your court case. If people go to libertygb.org.uk, they can make a donation directly to your legal defense fund, or they can make a donation to Liberty GB so they can continue to do the fight that you're representing for them. So I made a donation to you this morning, the equivalent of $50 US. Yeah. All right, and Kel, you've got your link to Global Conglomerates. I actually extended the show for a few minutes, so go ahead, Tim, because I know you want to say.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you very much for that. I did see the donation come in, and that's absolutely wonderful. We need at this moment every penny we can get. We have a lot of expenses associated with the Crown Court trial, and if anybody out there can help us with a donation to hit the big blue button, ladies and gentlemen, at libertygb.org.uk, as Annie says, and please help us with our legal defence, because it's an expensive process, and win or lose, we still have those bills to pay. So thank you very much for your contribution, Annie. It's much appreciated, and I do hope. Well, no, I don't just hope. I am absolutely sure we are going to prevail. I don't think that's a problem, but the process that we have to go through in order to prevail is designed to discourage the average man in the street from doing the same. And I think we all ought to be able to stand up and say what we like about Islam. And currently, there is a lot of disincentive to doing that. People think, if I stand up and say something about Islam, I might get arrested, I might get charged, I might get prosecuted, like that racist, bigoted, right-wing Islamophobe Tim Burton that I hear so much about. And so, it is important. We do have to stand up, and I thank you very much for your contribution, honey. It's much appreciated, and I do hope that there are other people out there who can help as well. So thank you very much.
All right, and Kel, you got your show?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
You know what, ladies and gentlemen, please do check out Red Fox Blogger on Mondays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Tim is one of the best co-hosts that this red-blooded female could have ever asked for. And we do discuss the issues of Islam and what is going on globally. I am very proud that Tim joins me over there at RSB. I am also very proud that Tim joins me at Infidels Are Watching, courtesy of Global Patriot Radio and American Patriot Radio, Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, because of the time difference for that particular show, Tim joins me once a month alongside Vlad Tepes, and we have our monthly roundup. So you can hear Tim at IAW the last Tuesday of every month. And Tim, it's an honor and a pleasure always to work with you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Kel, and the honor is all mine. So thank you very much for that.
Well, Curtis, I always forget to mention that you are a prolific author, using one of Kel's favorite words. And you're working on your 24th book, which is coming out sometime the end of March, sometime April. That'll be available for people to purchase. Right. They can go to your website, which is theoriginalradicals.com, and check out all your writings. You've got a lot of fantastic stuff that you go across the spectrum, whether it's to social services or whether that's security or even your fiction novel, which involves radical Islam. No, there's no such thing as radical Islam. Islam. It's the same thing as Bill Clinton's "What is." So I'm telling people,
the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. It sounds like it's going to be a great book, and we're going to be talking about your book as soon as you're done with it. This is my first time now on American Patriot Radio. Doc Miola, thank you for now finally carrying me. A little late, but we'll accept it. I have to really tease him on that. It's been a long time coming, and as I know more about this radio show that I'll be doing as a panelist, it will be with J.J. McCarthy. He'll be the host, and I'll be one of the panelists on Saturday mornings. I'll get that up on the website so people can join in and listen to us. It'll be fun. It sounds exciting. A new avenue to go out into. So I want to thank everyone that's been out there listening in. And Kel, guess who we have on Tuesday? Guess who I stole from you, who you stole from me, and I stole back again?
Wild Bill.
Absolutely. Wild Bill is going to be joining us on Tuesday. Yes.
Yay!
And I'm going to have Steve Turley on following that. And, Jack Engelhard is going to be also joining us later on this month on Valentine's Day. I've got Jim Horn, who was a former diplomat. He's an author now and security expert. He'll be joining us. So we got some exciting guests coming up in February. And actually, half of February is already booked. And that was only in just one afternoon. So I hate to see what the heck the rest of the month is going to be. Matter of fact, I've got Steve Lynch is going to be coming back on. He's got a new single he's released, and his agent is booking him. So I believe he's going to be on the 7th. So we're booked straight through Valentine's Day, guys. So I want to thank all your support out there. And we will be back on Tuesday, same bat time, same bat station. And we're going to close off with little Jeremy Dodge. So thank you, Cal. Thank you, Tim and Curtis. And thank you, Nicola, Steve, and those that listened in the chat room as well as in the studio. As always, you guys are aces. I have the best listeners in the world. All right, Cal, we share them.
Absolutely. You know what? It is what it is, ladies and gentlemen. We are sharers of the news. We share any way and every way we can. Annie, Curtis, and Tim, what an awesome show. Thank you, Annie and Curtis, in particular, for inviting me on alongside Tim.
It has been a pleasure.
It's always good to have you.
Always, always. My sister from the other mother in the wrong country. So we close out with little Jeremy Dodge, Stand Up.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
A revolution needs a war, and this war needs a revolutionary fight for your rights. The Constitution speaks of peace that's free. Open your mouth from sea to shining sea. Will the real Americans please stand up? No more hiding your face in the sand. Will the real Americans please stand up? United we're falling, but united we'll stand.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
Stand it right. When politicians take from you and me the very liberties that set us free. Up and fight for this democracy is you and me. We're the refounders saddle up, let's ride. Real Americans, please stand up. No more
natural, unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government. And freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
Something happening here. What it is ain't exactly unclear. Politicians with our lives in their hands, telling you and me which way we should stand. I think it's time we stop. Hear what's that sound? Everybody look what's going. Stop. Hear what's that sound? Everybody look at what's going. Stop. Hear what's that sound? Everybody look at what's going. Stop. Hear what's that sound? Everybody look at what's going. Yeah. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.